Electrocast.
Cars say a lot about who we are.
It represents freedom for a lot of people.
This season on Drive, I'm going to talk to all sorts of different people.
I looked at car names.
Yes.
And
yes.
I found all the car names that have science or astronomically
it's
inspired.
Crazy.
It's huge.
It is. Yes, I happen to be CEO of Ford Motor Company. For me, it's all about cars, movement, and our mutual passion for things that get us around. This is Drive, and I'm Jim Farley.
This episode is brought to you by J.Crew. This spring, J.Crew is telling a linen love story. From perfectly rumpled beach cover-ups and effortlessly sexy suiting to button-up shirts from the world-famous Baird McNutt Mill in Ireland, the new J.Crew collection is made to be shared, lived in, and loved for decades and generations to come. Shop linen like you've never seen it, and more new arrivals for spring 2024 at jcrew.com.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Fidelio.
And today we're talking a movie I should not be discussing with my older brother. From 1999, available currently on HBO Max, Eyes Wide Shut.
Stanley Kubrick's final movie.
His valediction, the last in his oeuvre.
This movie is classified, and I'm sure you'll agree, as an erotic thriller, right?
I think that's pretty accurate.
But to suggest that this movie is sexy, I think is like saying this is a Christmas movie.
It is surprisingly unsexy and almost, other than the outrageous orgy scene, surprisingly devoid of sex.
Because obviously when Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman signed on and they knew that it was an erotic thriller, there was all kinds of speculation. There was talk about Tom Cruise full frontal nudity and stuff, and everyone's like, what's it going to be? And Stanley Kubrick is all no holds barred and stuff. But what we got, at least from Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, maybe not Nicole Kidman, was relatively tame. I mean, the most naked he gets, Tom Cruise anyway, is that scene in the mirror, which was all of, 10 seconds?
In the mirror. After the party.
Yeah. And reports suggested that Stanley Kubrick's original conception was he wanted to get a major star, like an A-list star, butt naked on screen. And I guess, in a way, he got that for Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, he definitely succeeds with Nicole Kidman. She's naked within the first, 10 seconds?
Yeah, and then with that flashback pretty much consistently throughout.
Oh, the sex with the naval officer flashback.
Yeah. Some people regard this as the collapse of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's marriage. Obviously, he wanted them because of their real life marriage. He originally wanted Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, and that turned out bad regardless. But he did all the weird tricks that he did to Shelley Duvall on set of The Shining, allegedly. And they went to real counseling and talked about stuff. And then he put some of that stuff in the movie to mess with them. That scene with the naval officer it took 3 or 4 days of constant simulated sex, and Tom Cruise wasn't allowed anywhere near the set, and he forbade her to talk to him about it whatsoever.
Kubrick forbade Kidman from talking about the sex scene with Tom Cruise?
Right.
Weird. So you're saying that Kubrick was messing with them?
There's psychological stuff that was happening, for sure. And he made it weirdly personal. Bill and Alice's apartment is modeled after Stanley Kubrick's apartment, exactly down to the artwork on the wall. There's a lot of weird stuff, weirdly personal stuff happening for the talent behind the scenes.
I think that happens at the end of a filmmaker's career. I mean, nothing gets more personal than, for example, The Fabelmans.
Yeah.
Could Kubrick have been simply exercising his own sexual and filmographic demons?
Maybe. But I mean, if this is the thing that does it for Stanley Kubrick, then he died not long after this, but it might have been time to examine that, buddy.
It sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable about this film. How much Kubrick baggage do you bring to Eyes Wide Shut?
Like his notoriety is a big thing. Tom Cruise says he didn't enjoy playing the Bill Harford character, but that he would have kicked himself if he had refused. And in the special features for the DVD, which I remember watching 20 years ago, both Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman interviewed separately. When the subject of Kubrick's death would come up, they both immediately teared up. So if not, like a personal affection for the guy, they were at least emotionally invested in him and in this project. It was very important to them at the time. And I guess it would have to be because this is the longest film shoot in film history. It's in the
How long?
Guinness Book of World Records at 15 months. And at one point going almost a year of continual shooting, day after day after day, uninterrupted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Their kids were in England and they were little and they developed English accents. So he comes with his notoriety and everybody jumps on board. They either jump on board because they're like, Stanley Kubrick is doing a movie, I have to be involved in that. Or he asked a bunch of his friends and fellow, previous coworkers, and they were like, I don't want to do it because it's a Stanley Kubrick movie and you'll excuse me if I don't want to be tied up for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this film has his stamp all over it, but it had been gestating since 1971 when it was first announced he was going to adapt the novel, which translates to Dream Story. And then we got it, 18 or I don't know how many years later, 1999.
It was announced in 71 and then released in 99?
That's my understanding.
So almost 30 years. And also just 2 or so years before Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise split up.
Yep. But I mean, it was filming in 1996 in the summer, I think, and still filming. There were still reshoots being done in 1998.
Wow.
So it's hard to, it's like Elvis going in the military. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are just off the grid because they were contractually forbidden from taking other projects until Stanley Kubrick released them from Eyes Wide Shut.
I'm sure that changed the game in terms of actors' engagements.
Musta.
You got to put a cap on that.
This film changed a bunch of people's lives.
Like who else?
Stanley Kubrick made it his final film. This is his swan song. Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise. Not long after this, he made Magnolia and things, and that was his art house period. Vanilla Sky, which was strange and surreal and introspective. This is his mask period, because after this, he did Mission Impossible 2, where you have the identity changing masks, and he did. And Top Gun is a mask movie, I guess. Vanilla Sky is a mask movie. And then Minority Report.
How is Vanilla Sky a mask movie?
How is it? He has the regenerative facial prosthetic.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then Minority Report, he does that trick where he shoots himself in the chin with that thing that morphs his face. So he's concealing his identity.
That's a lot of masks movies.
Yeah.
I don't know why he approaches the underground sex club thing and doesn't put on his mask until after. Is it after he enters the gates or after he enters the house?
I would be wearing it in the cab. Exactly. Before you approach the gates, nobody should see your face. Not that it mattered necessarily, but this most notably is the start for your boy, Nick Nightingale.
How is Todd Field, the director of Tar, my boy?
I don't know. But we talked about Tar, and this was the set where he says that Tom Cruise, he talked to him about, what he wanted to do moving forward, and Tom Cruise absolutely encouraged him to be a director.
Wow, that's cool.
And then within a year or two, he had In the Bedroom, which starred Tom Cruise's brother.
So if you were to have a fantasy or a nightmare, I guess, depending on how you look at it, about your loved one having an affair, would it be hardcore sex or would it be the whole narrative?
What's the question?
Killer style, like she's taking off her dress now.
Yeah.
Let me go.
But that's not you said killer style. And I was like, wait, what? What is the question, please?
Okay, what I'm trying to understand here is the film plays a lot with what men perceive women's sexuality to be. And is Tom Cruise's fantasy of Nicole Kidman with a naval officer accurate, or would there be more narrative and like foreplay and setup and stuff to it?
No, he doesn't care about the looks across the room, and I would have given up anything. In his mind, the nightmare undoubtedly that's playing in his mind is some dude having sex with his wife.
Okay, so that's accurate.
Yeah, I feel bad for Tom Cruise, who wasn't allowed to see or talk about any of those sex scenes his wife was a part of, who then had to watch this movie and randomly just intersperse, like, boom, his wife having sex with someone else. And like, that must have been a tough viewing experience. But no, absolutely a nightmare. And the justification for this character is that that's what set him on this rebellious sort of quest, wandering the streets, ending up in hookers' apartments, ending up in a sex cult dungeon or whatever, and ultimately, kind of breaking down and telling her everything about it.
And so are men's egos so fragile that they can't even bear the idea of their wife fantasizing about another man?
Look, there's two aspects to this movie, and the basic idea is dreaming about infidelity the same thing as acting up on an infidelity or an urge or whatever, right? So Bill goes on his thing, and if he doesn't do hookers by circumstance, he at least smooches hookers and is hanging out with naked hookers and stuff, whereas she didn't engage in anything physically or do anything wrong, but she lusted after the dude and obsessed about him and woke up terrified that he was gone and wasn't sure if it was better that he was gone or that he might still be there or whatever. And then she has an erotic dream. It's that they were on vacation during their best time when she was more fond of him than ever before, and then all of a sudden she's obsessing about this dude for days, some random dude that she doesn't know. And that's not even is it bad? Yes, it drove him a little bit insane. That's not what did it for me. I was thinking that if the Barbie movie were made in the late 90s, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman would be Barbie and Ken, because I think that they are attractive people, but it's all smooth downstairs. There's like nothing going on that suggests hotness to me from either Nicole Kidman or Tom Cruise. Is she beautiful? Sure. Does she look like Barbie or whatever, like all tall with long legs? Absolutely. But to me, she's like the Celine Dion of actresses. She has obvious talent, but there's not a lot of soul in there. Not a lot of like raw attractiveness or sexuality, I guess. And so this movie does nothing for me, number one, regardless of all her nude stuff. And when she mocks him and emasculates him, when she's like, oh, I had that dream and it was horrible, and then once you left it was awesome, and she's like, your little tiny peepee or whatever she's saying about she's teasing him about the girls he was hanging out with. And she laughs. Oh my God. It just, it makes my skin crawl.
On Dr. Hartford's behalf?
Kinda. It's just like the mocking is a complete and total turnoff for me. And I think he's right. She's looking for a fight or whatever, and she gets stoned and she tries to belittle him while stoned. And there's got to be something in me just psychologically it just kills everything. And I wonder if that's reflected in my view of Nicole Kidman moving forward, because this is 23 years ago at this point.
Pretty much at the height of her beauty. I mean, she's
And I look at her after that, her Oscar roles and the hours and stuff, and particularly the last time she really impressed me, which is being the Ricardos. It's all technicality. It's like, wow, in a weird way, she channeled Lucille Ball in a way that I didn't expect, and I was kind of pleasantly shocked and surprised. But it all feels like artifice to me. And
okay.
Tom Cruise, likewise, he goes through the rigmarole, but never executes any, it's almost like he's ready to be rescued when those two girls want to take him to the end of the rainbow. It's like, oh, the guy wants to see me, no problem. See you later, girls. And then he's upstairs with Mandy, the overdosing hooker. And when he because he doesn't do anything. It's like a child's view of what a doctor would be growing up, look in her eyes and like do her pulse, and then she's fine. Oh, so glad you were there, Bill.
I figured he must have done something between scenes. Like he had to have administered some kind of antidote.
Did he have it in his pocket, some smelling salts or something? But then he would have been like, hey, she seems fine. Keep her here for an hour. Do you need me? Because I was about to go to the end of the rainbow over here, but nothing.
No, he really enjoyed the game and the hunt and the process, but I don't think there was no bite to him. There was no resolution for Dr. Harford. I think ultimately he wasn't maybe even capable of going there. So you talked about the emasculation of the Harford character as Alice, mocks him and belittles him and talks very overtly about her fantasy. Are you missing completely the desexualization of Alice that Harford did to open the conversation to begin with? He hasn't thought twice about her fidelity because he trusts her to be loyal, and he assumes that women don't think sexually, that he knows women better than Alice does, and he knows what a woman is thinking when she's undressed in his doctor's office, which was really funny, by the way, because in almost every scene in the film, Tom Cruise is sexualized, like Lily Sobieski's all up on, and Alan Cummings all up on in the hotel. Like, he's constantly sexualized almost everywhere he goes, except for the scene where he's examining the woman in his doctor's office under the supervision of the nurse. That's probably the least sexual scene of all, although she's unnecessarily sitting there nude. Like, you don't need to be just hanging out nude in order to use the stethoscope on your heart. Anyway.
I'm going to argue that we saw Mandy's boobs just as much dead in the morgue as when she was alive. And that was a pretty unsexy naked scene as well.
I mean, if you count Mandy overdose boobs, alongside morgue boobs as just being like inert boobs, then yes. But we see a lot of Mandy boob in the orgy scene.
And so I don't really understand. I think I understand what you're saying, because if he views his wife as desexualized and she, says, well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Smarty Man, here's what you don't know about me or whatever. And she tells him this unnecessarily elaborate kind of graphic fantasy and the dream she had and stuff. It's like, stop talking. And you can see his spirit crushed on his face.
Introducing Batiste sweat-activated and touch-activated dry shampoo. With breakthrough technology that absorbs oil and releases bursts of fragrance whenever you sweat or touch your hair for up to 24 hours, it's the ultimate hair care for girls on the go. Try the newest dry shampoo that's activated by you. Batiste, the future of hair care is here. Buy Batiste dry shampoo online or in store at your nearest retailer.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy. So you need to get an amazing gift. Wait, no, the perfect gift. And it needs to say, I'm a thoughtful person, and I appreciate you, and I know exactly what you like, all at the same time. Well, Gift Mode on Etsy is here to take the stress out of gifting, so you can find the perfect item for anyone and any occasion. It's easy to find gifts made by independent sellers for all the people in your life, like the pickleballer, the jazz fan, or the pasta lover. From 90s nostalgia and mixology to reality TV and gaming, there's something for everyone on Etsy. Whether it's a birthday, an anniversary, a holiday, or even just a day to say thank you, Gift Mode on Etsy has you covered. Need to find the perfect gift? Don't panic. Try Gift Mode on Etsy now.
Her thing sets him on this whole butthurt quest that he hears about. But what I don't understand is that they're at this party that they clearly don't want to be at. They're going because his friend invites them, and then
I'm assuming one of his best patients or clients.
Yeah, and then almost immediately, she's up on with the Hungarian dude, and he's off with the two girls on his arm going to the end of the rainbow. Like, don't.
Well, they both enjoy. I think in the constraints of their marriage, they both enjoy the flirtation, the titillation, but neither of them are interested in getting burned.
He wouldn't have gone through with it?
I don't think so. I think Harford was all poser.
I don't disagree. I think you're right. When they get there and they take his pants off, they're going to be annoyed at his can anatomy, because I think it's all smooth down there. Plus, I think he didn't have to worry about Alice's, fantasies or whatever, because this movie was 2.5 hours long, and half of it is Nicole Kidman's monologues. Her flirting is like her battery's running down. It takes forever and that guy must have been bored to tears.
Are you talking about the Hungarian gentleman? Yeah. He was so into it. What are you talking about? Do you want me
to go bone you in the bronze sculpture garden? Maybe not right now. Oh, so frustrating.
that was really frustrating. It was very
She
frustrating.
did it multiple times. And this movie does a thing where you say a thing, like you're like, ice cream sundae. And then Bill is like, ice cream sundae. And they just this
constantly.
I'm telling you, in the edit room, I could shave 45 minutes off of this movie easily. Just little edits and covering the edits with B-roll and inserts and stuff. Oh.
I was beginning to wonder if Dr. Hartford had a tic. Like, seriously, he repeated every line that someone said to him. And I don't know if that was just, he's like a verbal processor or something like that. But I kind of figured either he was stalling because he's not quite as quick and slick as he would like to seem to be, or he had this weird tic thing going on, because that was driving me bonkers.
And look, this is all intentional. Is it like, well, they rushed this movie, so they just kept in long takes and they were like, sorry, when they turned in the film? This is Stanley Kubrick we're talking about. There's legends that a scene of Bill walking through a doorway was 95 takes. The girl from Hocus Pocus, the original hooker who ended up having HIV later, I guess she had it at the time. She was supposed to be on set for a couple of days to shoot that scene. It ended up being over 2 weeks. Nothing is left to chance. It's all intentional, which is a little bit mind-boggling.
When the roommate hooker tells Hartford that the Hocus Pocus hooker has AIDS, was that intended to erase his boner?
I don't know, because if she knew that her roommate had just gotten the news that she was HIV positive, doesn't know that Bill and Domino didn't do it the night before, and she was all up on, isn't that dangerous? Why was she all up on just to then tell him, I have to tell you she has AIDS or HIV, sorry?
I think because Hartford's supposed to be irresistible, and she was like, oh man, this feels really good, but I ultimately can't do it because I know something that you don't. That you were probably HIV positive.
Maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's what I'm missing. Because Tom Cruise is so sexless to me, and he was going to get naked with Nicole Kidman, and I was like, ew. Maybe his allure is so widespread, and I just missed it. Because some of the motivations were really off to me.
I think I understand what you mean when you say that Tom Cruise is sexless. He has got charisma up the wazoo. He is so charming. He is so likable. But I'm afraid it's what I know about his personal life that makes him feel like a little bit less of a person with just natural tendencies, and he's very programmed.
Maybe. So does the lust for Tom Cruise apply to the party as well? Because he was like, when he gets caught, and is obviously, they were like, well, he got in here against, our policy or whatever, and he doesn't belong. So take off your clothes, please. If it wasn't a story, if it wasn't to scare the bejesus out of him, if it's true that Mandy would have overdosed on her own, if it's true that Nick Nightingale was on a plane back to, okay, maybe he had a bruise on his face, which, by the way, was the only allusion whatsoever to any violence or murder taking place, the only thing that was kind of confirmed. If all that is true, if it wasn't staged, what were they going to do to him? Were they going to sodomize him with the bird beak mask? The plague doctor mask? What was the goal? If he had been all right, I guess I'm disrobing for your enjoyment, what would have happened? Just humiliation?
Maybe it was maybe they would simultaneously humiliate him and also watch him copulate for their enjoyment.
That's what we want, I guess. Is what they want, is to see Tom Cruise naked like everybody else in this movie. Did you note that once the party turned ugly, all the masks turned ugly? Take off your clothes.
Terrifying.
And then we saw all the horrifying masks.
It's just a matter of perspective. But it was in that moment when he's in I don't know what you call that, when he's being questioned, it was at that moment where I kind of realized what Tom Cruise's whole approach to the Dr. Hartford character was. Tom Cruise in this role has nothing if he doesn't have commitment. He approaches every scene by planting 2 feet on the floor and not moving. He's maybe not going to go through with it with the hooker, but he's there. He's committed.
He did smooch him.
He cops a feel, he gets a little smoochy smooch, even when he's under all of the horrific gazes of the masked orgy people or whatever. He's, he might be scared, but he's fully committed to seeing where this adventure takes him. Even if it threatens his life. Like, that stuff doesn't make him flinch. When someone says, you better get out of here, your life depends on it, don't you kind of at that moment tuck tail and run?
I would, but I guess not Tom Cruise, because he could have fought all of them.
Is that what he's banking on? Because he had some outs and he chooses to get into trouble.
Yeah, I was looking for my moment too the whole time when he's like, take off your mask. I was wondering if that would have been the time to break and run. Like, are they prepared to full scale murder him? I don't know. Like, I can see the humiliation or whatever, but yeah, it's all intentional. I don't know. Is this a religious ritual? What's all the chanting? What's all the incense? What's with the costumes? Did nobody else go to Rainbow Costumes and get a mask there? He's like, oh, you need a mask, huh? And a cloak, huh? But where did everybody else get their masks? Very deliberate, like I said, by Kubrick. Do you know at one point in The Shining, the typewriter changes color inexplicably? It's never addressed. And that's never something that he would have left to chance. It was very deliberate. Once he's encircled and he's under the spotlight, his cloak is not black, which he specified to Millich a number of times. It is now blue and everybody else is in a black cloak surrounding him. He's very much under the microscope, and I think it's all intentional.
Weird.
But it's all atmospheric, and it's all Stanley Kubrick to execute this party, which was kind of about sex, but was kind of the least sexual thing ever. Like, they were all fully covered and stuff, at least the non-sexual participants or whatever. But
yeah, Ebert talked about the orgy scene being the height of the MPA's hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Saying that making it all chaste and weird Austin Powers type ways, like covering up, the naughty bits or whatever, simultaneously compromise a director's vision while also making what is obviously adult film somehow accessible to an audience that it's not appropriate for.
Yeah, I guess. So if people don't know what you're talking about, there were digital characters, whether filmed in post or at the time and just moved over, deliberately inserted to cover the graphic nudity and implied sex. I hope implied sex. And so they're hooded figures and people standing in front of everyone having sex, so we can't see everything. But it doesn't, when I think about this movie, for some reason, I think of the terror of the gate scene in broad daylight, where you feel this sense of dread, where the car drives up and hands him the threatening letter and stuff. I think of all the awkward exchanges where it's obvious that something's going on beneath the surface. And I think almost nothing about the sexy bits of this movie.
Everything that's happening in the orgy scene is pretty predictable. It really is just Hartford in this weird way confronting his impotence, like walking around in the scene, like nothing much happens. I mean, I guess like the ultimate sacrifice where Mandy takes his place and stuff in front of the council and stuff. But it also sets up what is either the most important question of the story, which is, did the sex cult murder Mandy and Nightingale? Or is that basically the biggest MacGuffin of this story?
Yeah, I don't know. The way, if it's presented in the movie, if you're not reading subtextually, that's what happened. It was all to scare you. There's some high-profile people things, like a Jeffrey Epstein kind of vibe, and you couldn't be allowed to know anything about this situation, so we scared you appropriately. If we were going to go through all the theatrical rigmarole of, to get our jollies or whatever, then we can certainly have you followed and scare you and freak you out with the mask, because all that stuff was real. It's not implied or whatever. He was definitely being threatened. They threatened him with the note, and then someone took the mask out of his bag, went into his home, and placed it on the pillow so that he confessed it all to his wife. I don't think Alice was involved. So if nothing else, there was definitely some shady stuff going on, but it is possible because it was Mandy, right? Do you think it was the same girl?
100%.
Okay, so there we go. So that's at least something substantial. She's known for her drug use. It is then entirely plausible that she would have overdosed after being dropped off, after being railed by a bunch of dudes or whatever. Maybe that was her thing. But she played that role pretty convincingly.
Oh, the role of the martyr?
Yeah.
And the sacrifice?
Why punch Nick and then put him on a safe plane happy back to his family? I'm not exactly sure. But if we're looking at this movie for the way the movie presents it, it was all a ruse. And they scared him enough so that he explained to his wife, what's this movie about? She has a sex dream. It pisses him off. It sends him off where he tries to be as unfaithful as a totally vanilla Ken doll can be. And then he comes home and cries about it. is what this movie is. What was going on with the sex club? I don't know. People are depraved all over the place.
He comes home. He comes home and he cries about it, and then they go Christmas shopping. This movie is about the endurance of marriage and of monogamy and how horrible people are and can be to each other. I mean, for any man who's listening, their partner has sexual fantasies about other men. Is that going to send every man into a crazed spiral?
I cannot justify any of the things he did from top to bottom, but is what he is doing equally as bad? And it was, for sure. And he deserved to be all broken down at the end or whatever. And for some reason that turned her on.
Right. I mean, I don't know that this movie is cohesive, but it definitely made me think about the complex characters, and Harper being probably the most complex, like in his naivete, in his impotence, in the fragility of his ego and masculinity, and yet him being so masculine and so kind of overtly sexual, and probably the most interesting thing to analyze in this film, which is kind of sexist for me because, I mean, Alice is probably equally psychologically interesting, but she's just very inactive.
I think that if you're not a fan of Stanley Kubrick, and if his fame doesn't precede him, and what kind of baggage Stanley Kubrick, what does he bring to this movie? The answer is a lot. It should be a lot, remembered as his final film. And if you're not on that bandwagon, I can see how this movie would kind of suck and certainly be monotonous and certainly be an hour too long easily. But it definitely has appeal. It's staged beautifully. All his films feel haunted to me, and in a Mulholland Drive kind of way. Even broad daylight scenes have this menace that is just terrifying. And I felt his peril and his drama. And in a weird way, this dream-like storytelling is really effective for me. I've seen this movie a number of times, and I think every time I watch it, I have to watch it because I don't remember what happens. Like, I don't remember how he gets out of the mansion alive. I don't remember what happens in the end. I think because I can't trust it, because some of it doesn't quite line up, I feel suspicion that it's not all a ruse. It's not a neat package like What's His Nuts says it is. That is just to scare you, and nobody got murdered. Nick's fine. He's on his way to Seattle to see his wife and 4 kids or whatever. I don't trust it, and so I don't really remember it. But I look back on this movie fondly for all the weirdness it contained. It's like him being like, I'm going to make the dirtiest movie ever and show Tom Cruise full frontal nudity. And then at best, we get like torso nudity and rated R digital insertions to cover up the implied sex.
It's supposed to be movie coitus interruptus, I think, the entire time, leaving you oddly kind of unsatisfied.
The least sexy movie ever put to screen. And I'm kind of in a weird way okay with that.
Well, I'm okay with that because it makes it a little easier to discuss with my older brother on whatever movies. That. And your final rating is?
I give it an all right.
I give Eyes Wide Shut a good because despite it being long and languid, there was more than enough for me to explore in the context of their monogamy and their marriage. So I think it was worth the time invested, and I'd probably revisit it again. So that's our discussion on Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's final film, which was released in 1999 and is available on HBO Max. If you enjoyed this discussion, check out a number of other Tom Cruise-related reviews available at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts. And hit us up. 818-835-0473 is our hotline. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film podcast, 2 guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
the making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electricast.
Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? This is Lawrence Ross, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my podcast, The Lawrence Ross Show.
Egomaniac.
It's a 2-hour weekly exploration into my mind. I also do sketches, celebrity impersonations.
You're out of order!
And I also do song parodies. Not too shabby for a blind guy.
Not only are you visually impaired, but you are geographically impaired.
New episodes are released every Friday. Check it out on your favorite podcasting platform or listen to it here on Society 13 on Electricast.
Electricast.